Okay. All right. It's another late night. And we're going to watch some stuff. And then we're going to get back to the debate between Norman Finkelstein and Benny Morris. Um, Featuring a moderator named Lex Friedman, who is let's put it like this. He's a man who appears to me, in my opinion, to be outwardly signaling that he's incredibly intelligent, thoughtful, and fair and open-minded. When in fact, he, instead of being those things, he's not very smart, not really paying attention, not really listening / comprehending what he's hearing, and uses motivated reasoning. I don't think he's good at thinking, and I don't think he's honest about his let's call it competence to sit there and moderate a debate. What were his major sins? So I don't do like 3 strike you're out kind of stuff. But what I do is, instead of like, I count up how hard the strikes are, kind of. I give it a hardness, a whiff factor. Or if it's a transgression, what could I say? You could say it's a, I give you this penalty. How many penalties until you're out? I don't know how to say it. I don't want to make a sports comparison, is what I'm saying. But I've counted 3, or maybe, I don't know. We're going to go through the script again, but the transcript. But he pissed me off. Okay, his first question, it's a little sloppy and wordy, but it's fine. He said, What to you is important to understand about the events of 1948 and the period around there, 47, 49, that helps us understand what's going on today, and maybe helps us understand the roots of all this that started even before 1948? What to you is important to understand that helps us understand what's going on today, and maybe helps us understand the roots of all this that started even before. So it's just incredibly like wordy. This is such a sloppy sentence. I don't think he was reading this. I don't think anyone would write a sentence like this. This is just a transcript of what he said, right? So it's like, okay, whatever. To me, this means he's winging it. He's winging it. He looks at his card and it says topic 1948. Or I think he's probably reading this part. For Palestinians, 1948 is a Nakba, which means catastrophe, or the displacement of 700,000 Palestinians from their homes as a consequence of the war. I think he was reading that part. That's a perfectly cromulent sentence. There's no problem. I have no problems with that. But then, this is, I think, where he just is like, what's going on with like 1948 and the period around there, 47, 49, that helps us, understand kind of what's going on, and maybe helps us understand the roots of it too, also of what happened that happened before 1948. That's like Sam Cedar style, right? Love Sam Cedar, but he has trouble spitting out a point sometimes. At least he did with Ethan. Um, Whatever. So that's like a little thing. Next time he comes in, um, he's was this him? Okay, yeah. He turns to Benny. Thank you, Norm. Norm asked that we make a lengthy statement in the beginning. Benny, I hope it's okay to call everyone by their first name in the name of camaraderie. Fine. Norm has quoted several things you said. Perhaps you can comment broadly on the question of 1948 and then maybe respond to the things that Norm said. Okay. Whatever. This is fine. He's... The moderator's characterization is of what Norm has said. Norm's opening statement was brilliant, by the way. Go back and watch part 1 where we hear it out in completion. But he's like, Norm has quoted several things you said. Perhaps you can comment broadly on the question of 1948 and maybe respond to the things that Norm said. So he's like, ooh, hey, he's talking shit. You know, whatever. This is not one of my Piccadillys. This is nothing. I'm just commenting on it that he likes to, as a moderator, turn around and just say something that's really obvious to the audience, but it's actually him signaling to this other guy, hey, you got to respond to that. He's maybe taking you out of context. So this is sort of like, this should have been a red flag for what actually happened. So then, Mao and Rabbani, makes 3 points. Roughly relating to, what was it? About the inbuilt idea of Zionism as being supremacist and exclusively Jewish, right? He's saying this has always been part of Zionism. He also talked about, he said Europe was not taking its share of the responsibility to help Jewish refugees after World War II. He's saying Europe dropped the ball. He specifically says, I think it should have been an international responsibility. The Soviet Union could have contributed. And what he's speaking about, by the way, is the displacement of Jews after World War II, right? He's saying an international responsibility. Soviet Union could have contributed. Germany certainly could and should have contributed. The United Kingdom and the U.S., which slammed their doors shut to the persecuted Jews of Europe as the Nazis were rising to power, they certainly should have played a role. Pew, 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 fire, fire, fire. That's a really great point. And it's a devastating kind of call out as to like, who's fucking responsible for the aggression from Europe to Europeans' own people, right? If you're going to just qualify Europe as one place, like they do with the Middle East, if you want to characterize it as broadly, it's like, well, this is just some inter-European conflict. So the Palestine shouldn't have to get dissected split into multiple non-contiguous zones that are policed by a U.S.-backed military. The Soviet Union could have contributed. Yeah, like there was so many there were so many lives that could have been saved from the Holocaust had these quote unquote allies. We're allies. That's what the A stands for. Um, but these no, it's actually it's asexuals, guys. I guess it could be allies, but like it's not really like I don't think you get a whole color on the flag yet. What if it's the ally pole? So like if you have all the colors of the rainbow flag, but the pole is for the allies. The straight allos. What am I saying? Oh yeah, we were talking about how he's Moin Rabbani. I always want to say Rabini because it rhymes with Moin, but it's Moin Rabbani. So he makes that fire point about how Europe as a whole dropped the ball, and then he discussed the demographics in Palestine at the time, talking about how there were 2/3 of the people, 2/3 of the population was Arab, and the Yishuv, the Jewish community in Palestine, constituted about 1/3 of the total population and controlled even less of the land within Palestine. And then but with that in mind, what the UN Accord partition dividing agreement bullshit was proposing 55% of Palestine to the Jewish community and 42% to the Arab community. So while they've got 2/3 of the people, they get less than half of the land. That's how the UN divvied up the land by just drawing lines on the map. Imagine if someone just came into your town and like right in the middle of the neighborhood, suddenly they're like, this side of the line, you're free. That side of the line, you're fucked. Nobody go over there. Nobody come over from there. Ever. And then just start doing all this violence to anyone who like goes up close to the wall or the line. That's what borders are. That's what a border is. It's like a bunch of people with weapons all say that this is the line you can't cross unless you stand in line over in this little thing and show us all your papers and pay us money or whatever, or pay our government money, and then we'll let you go. It's a bridge troll, but like all the bridge trolls with like every weapon and could kill you or imprison you if you don't cooperate with them. That's all it is. And it's like they all just say this is an imaginary line over here, because there's no actual line ever on a border. Like yeah, there's probably miles and miles of fence or whatever. Those are never like officially on the border though. Like the legal geographic place that something is, almost never is necessarily a good place to like build the fence. So it's usually like a kind of a wide zone where you're sort of gradually, like, you pass a line on the road where you're like, okay, now we're officially in this place. But your border crossing will be well before that. You'll be like interacting with these people on the other side of the borders, kind of like you'll be there. You'll be at the border crossing. You'll go through. So, yeah, it's not just some line. It's not a real thing. It's always just, if we all just say that it's true and we all respect it like that and we all treat it like that, then there's a border there. But like we always think of them as like lines on a map, as if, at least I do. I make this fallacy, and I have growing up, where you just sort of think that they're just, oh, that's where the line is because over here they're like this and over there they're like that. You know? I think when I was a kid, I used to joke, like make a joke of like every country, I'd say what they speak and then the name of the country with ease. And like a lot of times that's true. China, Chinese, Japan, Japanese, or whatever. And then there is probably a language for a lot of them, but a lot of them also don't necessarily just have a language.
Do you feel
like you wouldn't say, do you speak Saudi Arabian? You'd say, I guess you could say Saudi Arabian Arabic, but you know what I mean. Do you speak Canadian? I mean, but I don't know where I was going with that. So anyway, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, Rabbani is making 3 great points. He said the first thing about Zionism, the second thing about Europe, the thing about the demographics of Palestine at the time, and how the Nakba was inevitable due to the partition resolution. That partition resolution should not have been signed by anybody. And the Palestinians were right not to accept it. Or to even participate in it. All right. He mentions that his debate opponent sitting across from him in the room, Benny Morris, who is a historian, has written on these things he's saying. I think an article about Yosef Weitz and the transfer committees. There was a very detailed initiative to prevent the return, and it consisted of razing hundreds of Palestinian villages to the ground. That's R-A-Z-I-N-G. Razing, as in destroying them. Razing hundreds of Palestinian villages to the ground, which was systematically implemented, and so on. And so Palestinians became a stateless people. Now, what's the most important reason that no Arab state was established in Palestine? Well, since the 1930s, the Zionist leadership and the Hashemite leadership of Jordan, it's been thoroughly researched and written about by the Israeli-British historian Avi Schleim, essentially colluded to prevent the establishment of an independent Arab state in Palestine in the late 1940s. There's much more here, but I think those are the key points I would make about 1948. Okay. Really good, because he spoke to 1948. He talked about people who were contemporary to that time and their beliefs on Zionism. He talked about the state of the U.S. and Europe. Oh, you know what? Okay. He does mention the United Kingdom. He says the United Kingdom and the United States should slam their doors shut to the persecuted Jews of Europe as the Nazis were rising to power. They certainly should have played the role. So he is referring to a time before 1948, which is also fair because that's precisely what Lex had asked for, right? It's like, tell me about this, but also about before this. And there's also a thing like, okay, so Rabbani just talks about it. He just answers the question. when Destiny jumps in, Pestiny, he starts with this dumb introduction statement. Yeah, I think it's interesting that where people choose to start the history. I notice a lot of people like to start at either 47 or 48 because it's the first time where they can clearly point to a catastrophe that occurs on the Arab side that they want to ascribe 100% of the blame to the newly emergent Israeli state to. So, just an annoying sentence. I hate the passive aggressive tone. Okay? It drives me nuts. He's passive aggressive. I think it's interesting where you chose to start the history, where people choose. So what, Pestany, are you talking about your interlocutors? Are you talking about Norm? Are you talking about Moeen? He just says people. So he's just lobbing this stupid criticism in the air out of nowhere against nobody in particular. You know, people. People do this. People do a lot of things. People say a lot of things. People choose to start the history. Oh, I noticed it happens in either 47 or 48. Weird. And then he says these things like, but I feel like when it feels like, and it's just this passive language. The goal is, I feel like when you have this type of reading in history, he's talking about choosing to start history. I guess when you if you're weaving a tale, or you're trying to understand the true history, why would you start in 47? Or a lot of people start at either 47 because why do they do that? It's the first time where they can clearly point to a catastrophe that starts on the Arab side that they want to ascribe 100% of the blame to the newly emergent Israeli state to. He just wants to say people start in 47 because you can clearly blame the Jews for it? Because it's easier to blame Israel for doing the Nakba? I mean, he's just saying, like, if you don't talk about anything that happened before this date, then you're going to color the narrative. What do you mean it's the first time where they can clearly point to a catastrophe? They can clearly point to a catastrophe that occurs on the Arab side that they want to ascribe 100% of the blame to the newly emergent Israeli state to. They want to ascribe the catastrophe to this newly emergent state. So these qualifiers are just interesting. It's interesting vocabulary to choose here. So let's talk about passive voice. If I use a passive voice, it means I want to hide or obscure or draw focus away from the side that does the action. Right? There's a grammatical meaning to this, but there's also just kind of a rhetorical meaning, a way of doing this. Let's take a look here. So this motherfucker says, a catastrophe. He's saying his opponents in this debate find this so useful for them. We can finally, it's the first time I can point to history. Okay. A catastrophe that occurs on the Arab side. That's his characterization of the Nakba. I mean, this is incredibly passive. It's literally grammatically passive, right? Oh, is it? That occurs. No, I guess I would say, yeah, if I guess say, well, it's even less because it's a catastrophe doesn't have to be applied. So if let's say I said a sentence like, the Israelis killed the Arabs. This is called the active voice, right? It's active because the Israelis is the subject, killed is the verb that the Israelis did. But if I make it past voice, I could say the Arabs were killed. Makes it a passive voice because we can omit who did the killing grammatically. I mean, you may ask yourself, by whom? And we could say it, but whatever, that's the passive voice, and you don't usually answer those questions. You see a lot of this. Instead of car murders cyclist, active voiced, it's a lot easier to just say cyclist killed in car incident, right? So this active voice will explicitly ascribe blame to the one who did it. And I ask you, just because I did something, why do I have to be blamed for it? That's not fair. Well, passive voice to the rescue. Right? A jogger. The cops didn't accidentally shoot the fucking child through the wall in their bedroom. No. A child was struck by a stray bullet. Sandwich says, cyclist got run over. Cyclist found injured after altercation with a Cybertruck. High-speed altercation. So Destiny is just like, he's just a motherfucking dickhead from top to bottom, front to back, side to side even. Because like he gets you coming and he gets you going. He said yeah, and I was with him. Sandwich, sorry if I'll say infinitely less serious things compared to what you talk about. All right. Hell yeah, dude. That's what I want. I can get really silly as well. So this is also very serious matters, but I do find it's important actually to laugh at the absurdity of things that are wrong and harmful, because at least then we know we're not going to get tricked into believing it. You know? That's kind of what laughter is. It's just like your brain just being like, oh my God, it's so fucking stupid. And then we just burst out laughing about it. And it's cathartic. So anyway, Pestiny does like the longest, dumbest. It's not that long. But he just makes this point. He starts cherry picking. As soon as he accuses the others of cherry picking, he says the goal is to moralize. The goal is to moralize. Who Whose goal is it to moralize? We can only presume, because you're in a debate, that you're talking about Norm and Moini. So, like, what are you saying? You gonna actually say what? Who's doing what? Who said what? Their goal is to moralize everything first and then pick and choose facts. Bitch, they pick and choose facts. They pick and choose facts for the it's like he's telling on himself. So here's what he follows that up with. Whenever they're talking about 48 or the establishment of the Arab state, I never hear about the fact that the Civil War started in 47. That was largely instigated because of the Arab rejectionism of the 47 partition plan. Oh, wow. Wow, buddy. Whenever people are talking about this, they never talk about that other shit. Did you listen to all three of the fucking people before you? I mean, Norm started before that. He began the story at the end of World War II. That's where he started the story. Benny also talked about shit in the 30s. Moini didn't really... Did he say a lot of dates? I think he's just talking about what it was in 1948. Until here, he does say, given the territorial disposition, given the weakness of the Palestinian community, whose leadership had been largely decimated during a major revolt at the end of the 1930s. So he briefly mentions that. He mentions the 29th of November, 1947. It's not a resolution that could ever have gotten through the UN General Assembly today for very simple reasons. So he addresses the 1947 partition resolution. And he makes a very good argument. And Destiny follows it up with, whenever I hear people talk about 48, I never hear about the fact that they rejected that they did it in 47. So he clearly just didn't listen to a fucking thing that anyone said. He just had this written down. Speaking of people who just have... I don't even think Lex had too much stuff written down, and maybe he had notes. And is also not listening. Well, this is also stupid. After Moini made a very, very good case, talked about three general points that sort of tie up the general argument that we can go ahead and blame the Nakba on the Zionists. That they did it, and we can blame them for it. The other guys are arguing like, yeah, we did it, but you can't blame us for it. Come on, it was their fault. They were asking for it. That's basically what Destiny, which, I mean, it's like a match made in heaven. Just the most grotesque, dumb shit, bullshit, and horrifyingly immoral position. Might as well be argued by the most dorky, disgusting, dumb shit, fucking absolutely abhorrently immoral Pestiny. If it weren't for having Norm Finkelstein in this debate, I should not subject myself to it. Luckily, he's like deluded among three people who know how to string sentences together and don't piss me the fuck off. Although Benny Morris has given him a run for his fucking money, this guy's starting to piss me off. The more he talks, the more this dude opens his mouth. Ooh, boy. Ooh, boy. I don't like him. But he at least knows how to put a fucking sentence together. So Stephen Bonnell is just the wild card. What's his next talking point? Like he practices all his talking points. He's like, meh, 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 meh. Like, oh, I heard you say something, and then he's like, what did he say? He prefaced his statement, his argument by saying, I'll respond to that. And then a question for Norm to take into account. I think when he answers Benny, because I am curious. Obviously, I have fresher eyes on this, and I'm a newcomer to this arena versus the three of you guys for sure. A claim that gets brought up a lot has to do with the inevitability of transfer in Zionism, or the idea that. And then he literally goes on to just like reword transfer in Zionism. Okay? Like literally like I know this thing called transfer of Zionism. Again, not at all listening to the previous three people who have been talking at length about this exact question. A claim that gets brought up a lot with the inevitability of transfer in Zionism. Like, why would you... If you're in a debate with somebody on the question of the inevitability of transfer in Zionism, and again, transfer, as everybody at that table knows, including Destiny, because he just proved it to us, transfer is the idea that there would be a mass transfer of population, as in mass expulsion and or killing. It just means getting these people the fuck off your land in any means necessary. That is our euphemism for, right? Instead of saying they kicked out the Palestinians, we can use passive voice to say, well, sure, there was transfer done. Sure, on some would say could be a large scale for the time considering it was a large scale transfer that had been done. Yeah. Oh, you're talking about all the driving people off their land and murdering them and forcing them to flee to other countries. Yeah, you mean transfer. Yeah, you mean you transferred fucking bullets into their heads, right? That's what you mean by transfer. You transferred like a bulldozer on top of their house. It's like transferred it. Yeah, it's a fucking stupid, but they're all using it. I mean, Norm Finkelstein opened up the debate and he explained what it meant. And everyone nodded their heads and agreed. And then the three of these guys had a perfectly cogent, very easy to follow. I didn't have to scream at any of it. I did scream a little bit at Moni or Benny Morris because he just tries to downplay the modern day genocide. And he's using his own like misunderstanding of facts, including some facts that he himself documented and published in his own work, because he didn't know then that he was going to have to sweep for Israel this hard. Which brings me, it's been like a half hour, finally going to get to my point. Which brings me to my next point about Lex. Lex laughs. This I thought was very strange. Lex laughs. How does the AI know that it was Lex who was laughing? It couldn't, right? That means somebody did this, or at least somebody like went in and touched it up to fill it out. Somebody, because I just copied this off the YouTube thing and I didn't fix any capital letters or punctuation. All I did was remove timestamps. Anyway, so what did Lex do? I really can't get to the point. He's so distracting to me. So Lex, I guess I can't explain what Lex did until we understand what the argument was. So Benny Morris wrote, I think, several books, but the book in question had 4 pages that all described transfer, right? The driving away of Arabs off the land, ethnic cleansing. And he later, a few years later or something, republished it with additional material. I don't know what that's called when you release a new version. You know, it's like, oh yeah, here's this book, but it's like I attach like whatever, a bunch of other updated stuff to kind of update what's been going on since then. And so apparently he had 4 pages about transfer, but when he did the new version, when he did his new improved version, he added like an additional 21. So he had 25 pages that were all describing transfer. And not just like instances of transfer, but also like, quotes or studies or documents about, or citing documents about, people talking about doing it, intention to do it, right? And then official or like systemic practice of it. And but in his books, he also concludes that you could actually blame it all on the Arabs, because he just has like motivated reasoning. But those conclusions he comes to are sort of, they don't necessarily discount his historical work. Like he even though he's a dummy, like in that way of like internet arguable dummy, in terms of being a historian, he's actually a very good historian. His work is well respected or whatever. So in that, we can cite his book for its historical value, but we can absolutely disagree about his interpretations and conclusions about these historical documents and this historical pattern or whatever that he sees, right? The facts, right? The facts that he finds, those are all open for argumentation and defense, right? Well, poor Lex, does not understand any of this. Here's what Lex thinks is happening. Lex thinks this is like Ethan Klein versus Hassan. But instead of clips from each other's podcasts, instead of that, what they do, because these guys are like these are authors. So what they do is they clip chimp their books and they go, you said this, and they take it out of context, and then then they're attacking you, right? And he thinks like he thinks like all of these guys are going to be doing that. Like that's where his head is. His head is down here in the gutter with the rest of us, right? It's like drama slop, but he thinks it's like highbrow. It's highbrow, but and Destiny's like, I'm all in it. And like that's what Destiny's here to do too. This is just like a football game or whatever. This is like a live screaming chess match with checker bonus rules thrown in. So Lex doesn't understand any of that. He just thinks that they're picking on his boy. He can tell that Benny Morris is floundering, that he's being called out for his hypocrisy. Here's what you said in the book. Why don't you say that today? I do say, but you didn't read what was before that. You didn't read what I wrote before that part. So Lex steps in, literally interrupts. Did he interrupt here? We'll get to that other one, but this is the one that really sent me, okay? Okay, they start sort of interrupting each other. So, yeah, Norm talks like a little bit, and they're talking, and oh yeah, They interrupted Norm. He didn't even get the oven preheated. Okay? He was not yet cooking because he was kind of just he was just introducing the topic. It was the old historians. In Professor Morris's terminology, the old historians, he said they're not real historians. He said they're chroniclers. And it was the old historians who denied the centrality of transfer in Zionist thinking. It was Professor Morris who, contrary to Israel's historian establishment, who said, now you remind me it's 4 pages, but it came at the end of the book. No, it's at the beginning of the book. Transfer is dealt with on 4 pages at the beginning of my book on the Palestinian refugee problem. It's a fault in my memory, but the point still stands. It was Professor Morris who introduced this idea in what you might call a big way. Yeah, but I didn't say it was central to Zionist experimentary experience. You're saying centrality. Okay, I never said it was central. Okay, I said it was there. Right? So, Benny Morris is obviously just stepping all over Norm. First, for like the dumbest, littlest thing that you don't need to interrupt somebody over that. He's like, there's 4 pages that came at the end of the book. And he didn't get to his point. He never got to his point. Why? Well, it started with Benny. No, it's at the beginning of the book. And then saying it's at the beginning. And then he tries to get back on the point. Yeah, that's what he says. He gets back on the point where he's saying, you, Professor Morris, you introduced this idea in a big way. In terms of his professional work, that is, right? Yeah, but I didn't say every. It was central to... Whatever, man. That's your counter argument. Just fuck off. You don't need to be interrupting him whether the pages were at the end of the book or at the beginning of the book. It was still in the motherfucking book. It doesn't matter where the pages were. He's just trying to minimize it. He's always minimizing, whatever. But the fact that he interrupted pissed me off because Norm was about to answer literally a question that was given to him from the little salamander guy. I can't even think of his name. I hate him so much. That guy asked a question. Is it your idea that they would have just slowly expelled them afterwards, or is that a question to me or Norm? To either one, I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer. I'm curious for the incorporation of the answer. Yes, I am normal human. Oh yeah, I'm a real intellectual. I'm a real scholarly guy. No, I never went to get my bachelor's degree or anything like that. That's for dummies. Oh yeah, I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer. Yeah. And by the way, his question is what would have happened? What would have happened if Palestinians had signed the 47 partition accords? If they had just agreed to it first. Destiny seems to be arguing that there would never have been any displacement, any transfer. He said they all would have just lived there together and it would have been fine. And then he's like, is that your idea, that it wouldn't have been all fine? Basically. He's like, what? Your idea is that they would have, like, what? Genocided them anyways? Like, later? And then, so Norm is like, let's clear up some misunderstandings first. Okay? Number one, this is the motherfucking source sitting right next to you. His name's Benny Morris. All right? He's the one who studied this and published this and brought this to light for many people. He said it right here at the end of the book. Oh, no, it was at the beginning of the book. Okay, but all right, but that was number one, but number. And then here we go, 50 minutes in. We're going to find out why I fucking hate Lex Friedman. Because Lex interrupts and says, by the way, it's okay to respond back and forth. This is great. And also, a quick question for me. You're using quotes from Benny, from Professor Morris. It's okay to say those quotes do not reflect the full context. So if we go back to quotes we've said the past, and you've both here have written, the three of you have written on this topic a lot, is we should be careful to just admit, like... So here's where he explicitly says, oh, Norm is... he's taking him out of context. He's clip chimping him. This is like the lowest. He doesn't understand what they're doing. He doesn't understand the implications of this historian being cited his own work and pointing out how it contradicts what his mouth is spouting right now, sitting across the table from him. That is absolutely valid. And it's valid to counter it with the context. You don't need the motherfucking moderator to say, oh, but those are out of context, right? Now you might say he was being like, he wasn't being super explicit. He was being more passive aggressive than anything. He said, it's also okay to say those quotes do not reflect the full context. So we should be careful. And do you think that alone is why I hate Lex? No. I was not quite there yet. He goes on. Oh no, Destiny. Destiny interrupts. Destiny interrupts Lex. Lex was about to finish that sentence, and it would have, honestly, it would have made it more cringe. It's if he said, we should be careful and just admit, like, we all take things out of context sometimes, and it's not really like that, and you can't attack us with it. What was he gonna say? We should just be careful and admit, like, we're all biased. Or was he going to say, like, we're all on the same side at the end of the day? Or something? I don't know. I don't know what was going to come after that. But thank God, Destiny's the rescue. He goes, well, yeah, real quick, just to be clear that the contention is that Norm is quoting a part and saying that this was the entire reason for this, whereas Benny's saying it's part of that. Okay, this dipshit, again, he's on the same level as Lex, right? So you've got actual professors, and then you've got Lex and Destiny. They're playing their own separate game. Their game is that they're on the same side, but they have to pretend that one of them's neutral. Right? So as soon as Lex, as the quote-unquote neutral moderator, says it's okay to say that those do not reflect the full context, this is when Steven jumps in, just inserts himself, and says, well, yeah, real quick, just to be clear, that the contention is that Norm is quoting a part and saying that this was the entire reason for this. Whereas Benny is saying it's a part of that. That is not what Norm said. That's not what Norm said. Norm spoke at length on this topic, and he cited Professor Morris's own work. He leads the listener, the watcher, the viewer, the audience, the peanut gallery to our own conclusion. We don't have to be told the conclusion because it just naturally follows from the evidence. Right? If I tell you, oh, there's toilet paper all over the floor, there's dog footprints on some of the toilet paper, there's toilet paper with dog footprints on the couch, the dog is sitting on the couch, the dog has toilet paper in his mouth, and then I say, what do you think happened? Stephen Bonnell would ignore that. He would talk about something else. And then once you get onto a different topic, he would somehow come back around to that. And then he'd say, wait a minute, I just have this weird question. Are you saying that, like, the dog was the one who got into the toilet paper? Really? Sounds kind of sus. It's like, you're a fucking idiot, dude. So he's just butting in, helping Lex. I don't know if they're consciously... Well, they are consciously. They know their roles. They are definitely consciously trying to play their part. However, Lex is a double agent. Lex wants to pretend... Lex wants to look neutral, but then also swing for Israel. Because he wants Israel to look good, and he wants it to look like even a neutral person swings for Israel without even realizing it. A lot of people who are pro-Israel, who I describe as pro-Israel, say they're pro-Palestinian. They say they hate Israel. But if their only problem with Israel is Netanyahu and the current government, then they're not really anti-Israel. That's just, I don't know. It's if you try to play the center of an unequal fight, you're just helping the stronger one, right? I mean, I don't even think they do that anymore, but at some point, food was getting sent there. And some of it came from the U.S., but a lot more weapons and bombs and guns and bullets got sent to kill them. And now they're starving them. In 100 years, they're going to be teaching history class, maybe like, I don't know, 11th grade, high school stuff. And it's like European history, 1305, studying. And they're like, so let's talk about the Nazis. Who were the Nazis? Well, they were basically like the 1930s version of Israel. And everyone would go, oh. The time we're living in now it's like, it's the time when people say they would have built a time machine to stop the Holocaust. I mean, it's slightly after that. We've pretty much missed the time to stop, like, the worst atrocity we've ever seen. But it's going to be. It's gonna be the new big thing. I mean, I don't know what to say. Like, we can't compare it to Nazis anymore. When once it like grows and mutates beyond even that atrocity and that level of evil, it's just this new thing. It's become worse than we could ever imagine. Starving 2 million people. It's fucking in an open air prison while the world just watches. Can't get them any food? No. U.S. won't let them. Israel won't let them. Why won't the U.S. let them? Because they're in on it. They're fucking evil. They always have been. Fuck. We missed the cutoff. If you tried to travel back in a time machine to stop the Holocaust now, you couldn't do anything. It's already in motion. You'd have had to go back to whenever. I don't know. It's fucking awful. Anyway. Oh yeah, I was accusing Lex of being pro-Israel, even if he denies it. I think by his actions, he's trying to swing for Israel. He's trying to make excuses for Israel. And for that, I dislike him. I think he's a problem. He's problematic. The final reason, in the cherry on the bullshit cake, comes here. Where was it? Here. So Morris is trying to defend he's kind of talking about side issues, but he's basically responding to Norm's argument that we discussed earlier about how he wrote how important transfer was to the Zionist movement, and it was integral to Zionism, an integral part of it. And then they're going back and forth. Norm says, then why did you say, without a proper expulsion, a Jewish state would not have been established? He says, you're missing the first section of that paragraph, which was that they were being assaulted by the Arabs, and as a result, a Jewish state could not have come into being unless there had also been an expulsion of the population which was trying to kill them. Here's where Lex comes in. He turns to Norm, condescending as fuck. Imagine this inflated. I couldn't decide whether to go with airhead or meathead, but I'm almost imagining a kind of fluffy, porous kind of meat that makes up his head, and that can be inflated. Maybe a styrofoam, right? Very smooth styrofoam brain that's inflated. Looking up at a college professor, looking over at him and saying, Norm, I'm officially forbidding you referencing that again. And he points at the book, at Benny Morris's own book. I'm officially forbidding you from referencing that again. Hold on a second. Wait. We responded. So the main point you're making, we have to take Benny at his word, is there was a war, and that's the reason why he made that statement. Do you see what Lex has done? It was strongly implied before. Now it is literally blatant. He turns to Norm and condescendingly says, "You're not allowed to reference that book again." And then makes it this centrist rule that we all have to take Benny at his word. I mean, that fucking sent me. I think that's when I started screaming "fuck you" to him last night when I read that one, or when I heard that. It's like, you literally don't know what the fuck you're doing. You don't even understand what they were arguing about. And then he wants to tell him he's not allowed to reference the book written by his opponent in the debate. You motherfucker. All right. Well, I really wanted to watch this Gianmarco Soresi video, and I'm just about out of steam talking. So maybe let's watch this. I don't want to watch the whole thing. I wanted to just watch a few parts. I don't care about show business or stand-up comedy, but I'm interested in these sections about being Jewish and criticizing Israel. Let's take a look.
You've been doing comedy for over a decade, I believe. I've seen you on social media. A lot of people have seen you over the last year, in particular on the subject of Israel.
Sure.
You are Jewish. I was about to say, I think it's fair to say, but it's accurate to say that you are Jewish. Yes. Are you fully Jewish, half Jewish?
I mean, my mom's Jewish, so according to the thing.
Yeah, you're Jewish.
I'm
but
Jewish.
Then you've got a very Italian name. So your dad?
Yeah, my dad's like a little bit Italian, so he's playing it up.
Okay.
Mom's fully Jewish. In fact, she's playing it down. She got the nose job. But you know, I'm sure we look a lot more alike than...
They played you up Italian with Gianmarco. They went full on.
They did, because my dad enjoys The Godfather, all these things. But no, very, very Jewish.
Well, let's start our conversation with a clip that I saw of you. One of the first clips I saw, which I was like, this is hilarious. We're going to play this clip about you talking about anti-Semitism.
Jewish on my mom's side, Italian on my dad's side. I'm part of a secret group that runs the world's plumbing. That's an example of an anti-Semitic joke. And I bring that up because that's what anti-Semitism used to mean. It used to mean you'd say, oh, Jews, they run the banks, they run Hollywood, they're all cheap, they all have big noses. But then something changed. Something changed, and now anti-Semitism seems to mean criticizing Israel in any way, shape, or form, which feels different. I mean, now if you say something like, oh, I think Israel should stop bombing innocent civilians, some people are like, that's a stereotype. Not all Jews shouldn't bomb innocent civilians.
I've got so many things I want to say about that clip.
Please.
First off, did you make a conscious attempt post-October the 7th to talk more about issues like this? Or were you always doing this kind of humor?
No, I think per my point earlier, my mom, we never really talked about Judaism in any meaningful way. We went to temple once or twice a year, but I never got the Israel talk that I very quickly learned. I did do Birthright.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I did when I was like, I went to college for musical theater, so I knew very little about the world. That's my only defense. Okay. That I called, someone told me, they said, oh, you can get this free trip to a thing. And I was like, cool. Okay. And they did an interview. They said, how many times do you go to temple? I said, 5 times this year, my whole life. And then at the end, they go, do you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? And I was like, oh my God, not if you let me go. And so I did this. I did that trip, but again, very, very zero understanding of politics. I was just kind of a good Democrat boy. That's just how I fell in line.
But you went to Israel as a kid. You came back and thought what?
They did very little there. I remember like all the soldiers on the trip were like liberal in that they said we should do a 2-state solution. And that was kind of the end of the conversation. So I didn't learn anything, really. I didn't really fully grasp a lick. And then it was only later that kind of I learned a little bit more about politics and kind of figured out the things that I valued and cared about and what was being done. And then I think I just learned more particularly, I knew some certainly before October 7th, but I think after,
Yeah.
it's kind of synthesizing with like the people whose views I respected in other areas, talking about the Palestinian suffering and investigating it further through their eyes, while also seeing this incredible sizable fraction of Jewish people who I'd never seen be political in their entire lives suddenly feel gung ho
Yeah.
certainty Israel is it can do whatever, it can do no wrong. And I think just kind of witnessing that schism made me learn fast more about the history. And I think I talk about the things that I feel like I have the right to talk about. And so I saw Jewish friends, American Jewish friends, suddenly claim anti-Semitism in this new way that was very clearly hypocritical in my view. So even like, you know, the jokes that I make, they're really about the thing that I know, which is the American Jews using anti-Semitism as a undefeatable argument against any critique of a country that they're not even a citizen of. And that's the hypocrisy that I felt like, because I was so close, I could see it so within me, that I found an angle on, a comedic angle, but one that rang true to my own views.
And do you feel that your Jewishness allows you to address that topic in a way that if I did it on stage, it would just be, well, you're an anti-Semite talking about anti-Semitism?
100%. I mean, I think I live in the world that all other comedians live in, where especially when things are put online outside the club, where you can get in trouble if people feel that you're overstepping your bounds, sometimes rightfully so, sometimes over-exaggerated. But I think in the realm of talking about Judaism, I feel a degree of like, go ahead, accuse me of anti-Semitism. I know other people are being silenced because of the strength of that accusation. You can't do it to another Jew. And I've gotten emails.
Not for a lack of trying.
Not for lack of trying. People have written me, they say, you're pretending to be Jewish. You're putting this upon you so you can make your jokes. And I go, when I go down the street and the Hasidic Jews go, are you Jewish? They're putting it on me. I was circumcised. I have been told I am a Jew. That's part of the whole thing. They said, because my mom is Jewish, I am Jewish. So you don't just get to take away all that years and logic just because it serves your political interest in this one moment.
And a political thing, that's what's so interesting. It's not a religious test that they're imposing on you.
Yes.
It's about a foreign state, as you say, which is fascinating. It is a very emotive issue. It is a very divisive issue in Jewish communities. There's a bit of a generational gap. A lot of younger Jewish folks are more critical of Israel. A lot of older Jewish folks are still very loyal and defensive. Do you have to be careful around, I don't know, extended family? I know you've mentioned your grandfather on stage, like when you make these gags.
Yeah, no, I kind of argue with my mom sometimes about it, just because, you know, the way the news presents all these things, if you're getting your intake from mainstream media, you're just not getting a three-dimensional picture of people suffering. And I mean, you know, Twitter for its a gazillion shortcomings. One thing you do get on an app that doesn't censor is you see some brutal images and videos of Palestinian suffering in a way that you can't deny, in a way that they would never show on MSNBC in the morning, that my mom wouldn't see. So we argue about me trying to be like, you need to look at this. You need to understand the full picture. So we certainly have arguments. And I think when it comes to, like, you know, showbiz stuff, I'm lucky because I'm a touring comedian. My base is, do people buy tickets to see me? That's my power. But beginning, middle, end. I'm not reliant on a producer. If one comedy club doesn't want to work me, there's many others that will.
Have you had comedy clubs saying they don't want to work with you since October 7th?
Not me directly. There's certainly, like, I've been vocal in a way where there was a comedy club I was no longer interested working in either. But I've had friends, certainly, that it's, again, whenever you deal with the arts, it can always be tough, because did you not work at the comedy club because they didn't want to book you anymore because you were bombing, or is it because of your views? It's always muddled. It's like when people say they're shadow banned online, and you're like, is it that, or
Nobody
do
wants
your
to
posts
follow
suck? And there's always that. But there are some clubs certainly one in particular in New York, where like the owner was literally writing another comedy club saying you shouldn't be booking this one comedian, a friend of mine who was posting pro-Palestinian things online, and so of course it exists. There are a lot of Jewish people in show business, which I feel like is again another thing that if you're not Jewish gets taken as anti-Semitic, as if you're contributing to the conspiracy that the Jews run show business, as opposed to the reality that there are a lot of Jews in show business, and whether it be common, and of course there's reasons for that. There's a long history of Jews being relegated to the performing arts, which were seen as like a lower class thing, and the Follies to the Hollywood Network to comedy clubs.
And a lot of these people in showbiz, especially in Hollywood, are super liberal on most issues.
On most
That's what's
issues.
so fascinating.
On most issues, and I think
except this one,
and that was also kind of the conundrum of Jews who, you know, maybe I did a Black Lives Matter march with in 2020, suddenly being resolute that any military action by Israel was 100% on the up and up, and it should not be questioned at all, and the hypocrisy was just so fucking apparent. And I think within show business, you know, again, the conspiracy is the idea that the Jews run Hollywood, as in like there is a network, there is an overall plan. But what did happen is there were a lot of Jewish people in positions of power, and a lot of them felt very singularly when it came to Israel being correct and shouldn't be criticized. And so suddenly they acted in ways that they were affecting and making business decisions based on someone else's political views. And that's when I go, you guys, my Jewish brothers and sisters, and I think a lot of comedians we're about to see with Bill Maher, they really do believe in their soul. If I talk to this guy, who knows? Maybe I sway him a little, and I go, that's where you've become blind to what people in power do. They do what they want. You're being used. You're being used. And maybe you agree with them on some things. Like, you know, at the end of the day, Bill Maher and Trump have a lot more in common than not. And that's part of the whole thing.
So Bill Maher, just for context for people who aren't aware, who claims to be a liberal, I laugh out loud as he says that, he had dinner with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago recently. Let's have a clip. Let's play a clip of Bill talking about how that dinner went.
I told him I thought parts of his plan for Gaza were wacky, but that I had supported him in the idea that Gaza could be Dubai instead of hell. I told him he was wrong when he tweeted the night before that I was critical of all things Trump. Not true. Check the tapes. Moving Israel's embassy to Jerusalem, loved it. The border did need to be controlled. I'm glad the cops are getting their morale back.
Bill Maher, you talk about it wasn't so long ago. He has been the face of the free speech brigade for years.
And by the way, only because it hurt his bottom line.
Hurt his bottom line.
Hurt his bottom line.
And because he doesn't like pro-Palestine people. Israel has always been a strong issue for him. He's one of these guys who likes to be liberal except on Israel.
I'm sure everyone he hooks up with is Gen Z, and so he's tired of hearing about their pronouns and whatnot.
But he's been obsessed with the woke left and free speech.
Of course.
And here he is having dinner with the most anti-free speech politician in modern American history.
And pitching it like he is having a conversation, creating dialogue. And I talked about with my podcast co-host, Russell Daniels, his point was like, oh, you want to have a conversation? Then go talk to a Trump supporter in the world. This is just two millionaires having dinner together. You're just having a nice dinner. Who wouldn't?
Two racist, bigoted billionaires. Bill Maher has his own history of Islamophobia,
of course,
anti-black remarks, etc., etc.
But the idea that he pitched, like his version of saving face, was like we had a dialogue, and it's like, no, you didn't at all. You just had a nice, probably really good dinner and laughed and
when you left, Donald Trump probably chuckled with his advisors. Another one down.
Of course, and I just think people need to look at Bill Maher, talk about bullshit, and just go, okay, this.
All right. That's pretty interesting. I don't want to just play the whole thing, but kind of interesting. I'm going to go back. So basically this stream, instead of being part 3, it's part 3, but I'm going to make this whole thing is like about 5 hours long. So this is just going to be part 1. which took us 2 streams to do. But that was going through it cold. That was going through it the first time, following along with the transcript. Today, I reviewed the transcript, made a lot of very strong judgments, and I feel like more or less I can talk about what was generally argued, what was on the table, and what everyone's advice was. Now, I stopped somewhere around partition. I don't remember. Okay, yeah, because the year 1948, then we start talking about the partition agreement, and I guess that's going to continue for well into the second hour. It'll be the whole second actual hour. Maybe I could cut this into 4 parts. I don't know, 120 each, 150 each, something like that. But whatever this is, it's part 1. They've got it split into 1948, partition, October 7, Gaza, peace, hope for the future. So I guess we'll just do it like that. I've listened to the first part of partition, but what I think we'll do is go back and listen to 1948 again, just the first hour. And the next stream we'll start on part 2, going through the transcript. But yeah, today's just going to be the wrap-up review of part 1, right? So it's part 1.3. Part 1.3. So yeah, I guess if I go through everything in this way, where we'll watch the debate, follow along with the transcript, and then read through the transcript and talk about stuff, and then watch it again, probably have 3 or 4 streams per hour. Gaza's the shortest section. Gaza goes from 3 to 327, 328. They don't talk about Gaza for more than 30 minutes. They spent a long time talking about 1948. They spent a long time talking about the partition. And I'd argue maybe they didn't need to have that much weight on them. I think everyone made their point by the time because I've read the transcripts about 20 minutes into this conversation, which goes on for 2 hours and 10 minutes almost. And they're just going in circles in terms of like, wait, you think they would have accepted the partition? They ask questions like, would Israel still have been violent if they had accepted the partition? Or they should have accepted it. They refused to do it. It's their fault. And then at some point, Rabini tried to pull like a comparison. He says, it's like they do today. And he basically was saying that the wholesale slaughter, I mean, it was very active at the time of this debate. This was on March 14th. This is March of 2024. Yeah. And he compares the modern day slaughter. What did he find that? Is it today? Right. The Palestinians never actually. This is Benny Morris. The Palestinians have never actually agreed to pay for their mistakes. They made mistakes, they attack, and they suffer as a result. And we see something similar going on today in the Gaza Strip. They do something terrible. They kill 1,200 Jews. They abduct 250 women and children and babies and old people and whatever. And then they start screaming, "Please save us from what we did." Have you ever heard someone say that, like, pronouns are, like, dangerous? Well, kind of like passive voice, there is pronoun fuckery that we can do. This is why they don't want you to teach kids about pronouns. So, mind these pronouns here. Why don't I make this bigger? Okay. Palestinians. Boom. With a definite article. Let's check out all the times pronouns are appearing. They made mistakes, they attack, they appear, or they suffer as a result. And when we see something similar going on today in the Gaza Strip, they do something terrible. They kill 1,200 Jews. They abduct them, people, whatever. Then they start screaming, please save us from what we did. Because the Jews are counterattacking. So this is where I got mad. Now, I wasn't because of the pronouns. I didn't get triggered by pronouns. But they are interesting to notice. Because these are collective pronouns. They could refer to a whole group of people. They weren't talking about an NB, a really evil NB that killed 1,200 Jews. That's not what they're doing here. No, they're trying to... So, even though he doesn't say they're the same, he connects this together. He said in 47-48, the Arabs started a war. And people pay for their mistakes. The Palestinians have never actually agreed to pay for their mistakes. That's just like the most fucked up, grotesque, like, I can't even. I'm just imagining like a fucking. That's just like the most like evil fucking way to talk about or to characterize like an abuser abusing a victim and characterizing it like, well, the victim never agreed to pay for their mistakes. They never actually agreed to pay for their mistakes. They made mistakes. They suffered as a result. It's so fucking evil. I don't know how else to say it. It sounds cartoonishly evil. Does that make sense? They're cartoons. It's just maybe the cartoons weren't so wrong. That people can be cartoonishly evil. No, he's being. It's complete like motivated reasoning. He can't not be a Zionist. He can't not. It's so locked in to his head. He's never gonna figure it out. In 47, 48, the Arabs started a war, and actually, people pay for their mistakes. So he's blaming the whole genocide on October 7th. He's saying that they, the ones who kidnapped and the ones who killed, they, the same group, the same ones, those people, them, screaming, save us. Save us from what we did. So he's obviously being tongue-in-cheek here. But this is just a fucking wildly racist way to talk about Arabs. I do not condone any of this from Benny here. It's just fucking awful. It's ugly. It's absolutely like it just. I've seen videos of people who are fucking literally starving to death in Gaza. It's on an unimaginable scale how horrifying it is. It's beyond anything the Nazis did. I mean, it's just like right out in the open. And they're... Yeah, 1,200 Jews, 250 Jews, right? You can add like 3 fucking zeros to that number. And it's the number of Palestinians. Women, children, babies, old people, and fucking men for that matter. Fucking men die. Men get killed. Men get murdered. All of them. Not even murdered. Fucking starved. I can't think of anything more fucking cruel. Inhuman. Like, humanity is gonna... I don't know. I don't know what's gonna happen in response to this, but it's not gonna fucking be pretty. The world, I mean, I don't know. Can the world stand for that shit? They already are. They're just letting it happen. But man, is it fucked. All right, let's watch.
First question is about 1948.
We're going to go 1.25 speed. so it shouldn't take us a full hour.
For Israelis, 1948 is the establishment of the State of Israel and the War of Independence. For Palestinians, 1948 is the Nakba, which means catastrophe, or the displacement of 700,000 Palestinians from their homes as a consequence of the war. What to you is important to understand about the events of 1948 and the period around there, 47, 49, that helps us understand?
He is reading that. He's reading those exact words.
What's going on today. And
who wrote that?
Maybe helps us understand the roots of all of this.
He can't be reading it. I think he's just looking at maybe some. I don't think that's verbatim what he had written. I don't know. We can't really see. I can't zoom in on that. I don't know.
That started even before 1948.
It's just a sloppy question, Lex. You're trying too hard to sound overly smart. That's what it is. It's like the little kid trying to sound smart. So you just wordify your sentences. Listen to Norm. He doesn't have to do that at all. He just speaks with clear, logical grammar, and you don't have to give 12 examples. Like if you give another example, and then or an example or a third thing, like smart people are always like the front, and the final thing. They have a rhythm to it. So you're like, if I just have one thing, I have to make up another thing. So I don't know. We'll hear that it's a stark contrast in the level of just constructing a question or a sentence from these characters here.
I was hoping that Norm can speak first, and Benny, then Ween, and then Norm.
After World War II, the British decided that they didn't want to deal with the Palestine question anymore, and the ball was thrown into the court of the United Nations. Now, as I read the record, the UN was not attempting to arbitrate or adjudicate rights and wrongs. It was confronting a very practical problem. There were two national communities in Palestine, and there were irreconcilable differences on fundamental questions, most importantly, looking at the historic record on the question of immigration, and associate with the question of immigration, the question of land. The UN Special Committee on Palestine, which came into being before the UN 181 partition resolution, the UN Special Committee, it recommended two states in Palestine. There was a minority position represented by Iran, India, Yugoslavia. They supported one state, but they believed that if forced to, the two communities would figure out some sort of modus vivendi and live together. United Nations General Assembly supported partition between what it called a Jewish state and an Arab state. Now, in my reading of the record, and I understand there's new scholarship on the subject, which I've not read, but so far as I've read the record, there's no clarity on what the United Nations General Assembly meant by a Jewish state and an Arab state, except for the fact that the Jewish state would be demographically, the majority would be Jewish, and the Arab state demographically would be Arab. The UNSCOP, the UN Special Committee on Palestine, it was very clear, and it was reiterated many times, that in recommending two states, each state, the Arab state and the Jewish state, would have to guarantee full equality of all citizens with regard to political, civil, and religious matters. Now, that does raise the question, if there is absolute full equality of all citizens, both in the Jewish state and the Arab state, with regard to political rights, civil rights, and religious rights, apart from the demographic majority, it's very unclear what it meant to call a state Jewish or call a state Arab. In my view, the partition resolution was the correct decision. I do not believe that the Arab and Jewish communities could, at that point, be made to live together. I disagree with the minority position of India, Iran, and Yugoslavia, and that not being a practical option, two states was the only other option. In this regard, I would want to pay tribute to what was probably the most moving speech at the UN General Assembly proceedings by the Soviet Foreign Minister Gromyko. I was very tempted to quote it at length, but I recognized that would be taking too much time. So I asked a young friend, Jamie Stern-Weiner, to edit it and just get the essence of what Foreign Minister Gromyko had to say. During the last war, Gromyko said, the Jewish people underwent exceptional sorrow and suffering. Without any exaggeration, this sorrow and suffering are indescribable. Hundreds of thousands of Jews are wandering about in various countries of Europe in search of means of existence and in search of shelter. The United Nations cannot and must not regard this situation with indifference. Past experience, particularly during the Second World War, shows that no Western European state was able to provide adequate assistance for the Jewish people in defending its rights and its very existence from the violence of the Hitlerites and their allies. This is an unpleasant fact, but unfortunately, like all other facts, it must be admitted. Gromyko went on to say, in principle, he supports one state, or the Soviet Union supports one state. But, he said, if relations between the Jewish and Arab populations of Palestine proved to be so bad that it would be impossible to reconcile them and to ensure the peaceful coexistence of the Arabs and the Jews, the Soviet Union would support two states. I personally am not convinced that the two states would have been unsustainable in the long term if, and this is a big if, the Zionist movement had been faithful to the position it proclaimed during the UNSCOP public hearings. At the time, Ben-Gurion testified, quote, I want to express what we mean by a Jewish state. We mean by a Jewish state simply a state where the majority of the people are Jews, not a state where a Jew has in any way, any privilege more than anyone else. A Jewish state means a state based on absolute equality of all her citizens and on democracy. Alas, this was not to be. As Professor Morris has written, quote, Zionist ideology and practice were necessarily and elementally expansionist. And then he wrote in another book, transfer, the euphemism for expulsion, transfer was inevitable and inbuilt into Zionism because it sought to transform a land which was Arab into a Jewish state. And a Jewish state could not have arisen without a major displacement of Arab population. And because this aim automatically produced resistance among the Arabs, which in turn persuaded the Yeshuv's leaders, the Yeshuv being the Jewish community, the Yeshuv's leaders that a hostile Arab majority or large minority could not remain in place if a Jewish state was to arise or safely endure. Or, as Professor Morris retrospectively put it, quote, a removing of a population was needed. Without a population expulsion, a Jewish state would not have been established, unquote. The Arab side rejected outright the partition resolution. I won't play games with that. I know a lot of people tried to prove it's not true. It clearly, in my view, is true, the Arab side rejected outright the partition resolution, while Israeli leaders, acting on the compulsions inevitable and inbuilt into Zionism, found the pretext in the course of the first Arab-Israeli war to expel the indigenous population and expand its borders. I therefore conclude that neither side was committed to the letter of the partition resolution, and both sides aborted it.
Thank you, Norm. Norm asked that you make a lengthy statement in the beginning. Benny, I hope it's okay to call everybody by their first name in the name of camaraderie. Norm has quoted several things you said. Perhaps you can comment broadly on the question of 1948 and maybe respond to the things that Norm said.
Yeah. UNSCOP, the United Nations Special Committee on Palestine, recommended partition. The majority of UNSCOP recommended partition, which was accepted by the UN General Assembly in November 1947, essentially looking back to the Peel Commission in 1937. 10 years earlier, a British commission had looked at the problem of Palestine, the two warring national groups who refused to live together, if you like, or consolidate a unitary state between them. And Peel said there should be two states. That's the principle. The country must be partitioned into two states. This would give a modicum of justice to both sides, if not all their demands, of course. And the United Nations followed suit. The United Nations, UNSCOP, and then the UN General Assembly, representing the will of the international community, said two states is the just solution in this complex situation. The problem was that immediately with the passage of the resolution, the Arab states and the Arabs of Palestine said no, as Norman Finkelstein said. They said no, they rejected the partition idea, the principle of partition, not just the idea of what percentage which side should get, but the principle of partition they said no to. The Jews should not have any part of Palestine for their sovereign territory. Maybe Jews could live as a minority in Palestine. That also was problematic in the eyes of the Palestinian Arab leadership. Husseini had said only Jews who were there before 1917 could actually get citizenship and continue to live there. But the Arabs rejected partition, and the Arabs of Palestine launched, in very disorganized fashion, war against the resolution, against the implementation of the resolution, against the Jewish community in Palestine. And this was their defeat in that civil war between the two communities while the British were withdrawing from Palestine. Led to the Arab invasion, the invasion by the Arab states in May 1948 of the country. Again, basically with the idea of eradicating or preventing the emergence of a Jewish state in line with the United Nations decision and the will of the international community. Norman said that the Zionist enterprise, and he quoted me, meant from the beginning to transfer or expel the Arabs of Palestine, or some of the Arabs of Palestine. And I think he's sort of quoting out of context. The context in which the statements were made that the Jewish state could only emerge if there was a transfer of Arab population was preceded, in the way I wrote it and the way it actually happened, by Arab resistance and hostilities towards the Jewish community. Had the Arabs accepted partition, there would have been a large Arab minority in the Jewish state, which emerged in 47. And in fact, Jewish economists and state builders took into account that there would be a large Arab minority and its needs would be cared for, etc. But this was not to be, because the Arabs attacked. And had they not attacked, perhaps a Jewish state with a large Arab minority could have emerged, but this didn't happen. They went to war, the Jews resisted, and in the course of that war, Arab populations were driven out. Some were expelled, some left because Arab leaders advised them to leave or ordered them to leave. And at the end of the war, Israel said they can't return because they just tried to destroy the Jewish state. And that's the basic reality of what happened in 48. The Jews created a state. The Palestinian Arabs never bothered to even try to create a state before 48 and in the course of the 1948 war. And for that reason, they have no state to this day. The Jews do have a state because they prepared to establish a state, fought for it, and established it, hopefully lastingly.
When you say hostility, in case people are not familiar, there was a full-on war where Arab states invaded, and Israel won that war.
Let me just add to clarify. The war had two parts to it. The first part was the Arab community in Palestine, its militiamen, attacked the Jews from November 1947. In other words, from the day after the UN partition resolution was passed, Arab gunmen were busy shooting up Jews, and that snowballed into a full-scale civil war between the two communities in Palestine. In May 1948, a second stage began in the war in which the Arab states invaded the new state, attacked the new state, and they too were defeated, and thus a state of Israel emerged. In the course of this two-stage war, a vast Palestinian refugee problem occurred.
And so after that, the transfer, the expulsion, the thing that people call the Nakba happened. Nguyen, could you speak to 1948 and the historical significance of it?
Sure. There's a lot to unpack here. I'll try to limit myself to just a few points. Regarding Zionism and transfer, I think Chaim Weizmann, the head of the World Zionist Organization, had it exactly right when he said that the objective of Zionism is to make Palestine as Jewish as England is English or France is French. In other words, as Norman explained, a Jewish state requires Jewish political, demographic, and territorial supremacy. Without those three elements, the state would be Jewish in name only. And I think what distinguishes Zionism is its insistence, supremacy, and exclusivity. That would be my first point. The second point is, I think what the Soviet foreign minister at the time, Andrei Gromyko, said is exactly right, with one reservation. Gromyko was describing a European savagery unleashed against Europe's Jews. At the time, it wasn't Palestinians or Arabs. The savages and the barbarians were European to the core. It had nothing to do with developments in Palestine or the Middle East. Secondly, at the time that Gromyko was speaking, those Jewish survivors of the Holocaust and others who were in need of safe haven were still overwhelmingly on the European continent and not in Palestine. And I think, given the scale of the savagery, I don't think that any one state or country should have borne the responsibility for addressing this crisis. I think it should have been an international responsibility. The Soviet Union could have contributed. Germany certainly could and should have contributed. The United Kingdom and the United States, which slammed their doors shut to the persecuted Jews of Europe as the Nazis were rising to power, they certainly should have played a role. But instead, what passed for the international community at the time decided to partition Palestine. And here I think we need to judge the partition resolution against the realities that obtained at the time. Two-thirds of the population of Palestine was Arab. The Yishuv, the Jewish community in Palestine, constituted about one-third of the total population and controlled even less of the land within Palestine. As a preeminent Palestinian historian, Walid al-Khalidi has pointed out, the partition resolution, in giving roughly 55% of Palestine to the Jewish community, and I think 42% to the Arab community, to the Palestinians, did not preserve the position of each community or even favor one community at the expense of the others. Rather, it thoroughly inverted and revolutionized the relationship between the two communities. And as many have written, the Nakba was the inevitable consequence of partition, given the nature of Zionism, given the territorial disposition, given the weakness of the Palestinian community, whose leadership had been largely decimated during a major revolt at the end of the 1930s, given that the Arab states were still very much under French and British influence. The Nakba was inevitable, the inevitable product of the partition resolution. And one last point also about the UN's partition resolution is, yes, formally, that is what the international community decided on the 29th of November, 1947. It's not a resolution that could ever have gotten through the UN General Assembly today for a very simple reason. It was a very different General Assembly. Most African, most Asian states were not yet independent. Were the resolution to be placed before the international community today, and I find it telling that the minority opinion was led by India, Iran, and Yugoslavia, I think they would have represented the clear majority. So partition, given what we know about Zionism, given that it was entirely predictable what would happen, given the realities on the ground in Palestine, was deeply unjust. And the idea that either the Palestinians or the Arab states could have accepted such a resolution is I think, an illusion. That was in 1947. We saw what happened in 48 and 49. Palestinian society was essentially destroyed. Over 80%, I believe, of Palestinians resident in the territory that became the State of Israel were either expelled or fled, and ultimately were ethnically cleansed, because ethnic cleansing consists of two components. It's not just forcing people into refuge or expelling them, it's just as importantly preventing their return. And here, and Benny Morris has written, I think, an article about Yosef Weitz and the transfer committees. There was a very detailed initiative to prevent their return, and it consisted of razing hundreds of Palestinian villages to the ground, which was systematically implemented, and so on. And so Palestinians became a stateless people. Now, what is the most important reason that no Arab state was established in Palestine? Well, since the 1930s, the Zionist leadership and the Hashemite leadership of Jordan, as has been thoroughly researched and written about by the Israeli-British historian Avi Shlaim, essentially colluded to prevent the establishment of an independent Arab state in Palestine in the late 1940s. There's much more here, but I think those are the key points I would make about 1948.
We may talk about Zionism, Britain, UN assemblies, and all the things you mentioned. There's a lot to dig into. So, again, if we can keep it to just one statement moving forward.
Sure.
After Stephen, if you want to go along.
Much more here, but I think those are the key points. I would make about 1948.
We may talk about Zionism. And UN assemblies and all the things you mentioned. There's a lot to dig into. So, again, if we can keep it to just one statement moving forward.
Sure. There's much more here, but I think those are the key points I would make about 1948.
all the things just one state acknowledge the fact.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. History. It feels like the goal is to moralize everything first, and then to pick and choose facts that kind of support the statements of your initial moral statement afterwards. Whenever people talk about New York State, I never hear about the fact that the war started in 1947. It was state because their rejections of the voice of British. I never hear about the fact that the majority of land was acquired happened by purchases from Jewish organizations of Palestinian Arabs of the Ottoman Empire before the mandatory period in 1919 started. Funny enough, Jordan was the same Arabs, probably selling the lands they are reading about. I never hear about the multiple times that Arabs rejected partition, rejected living with Jews, rejected any sort of state that was even had any sort of Jewish society. It was right before that the partition plan was unfair, and that's why the Arabs rejected it. They rejected it because it was unfair, because the amount of land Jews given. And not just due to the fact that Jews were given land at all, as though a 30% partition or a 25% partition would have been accepted, when I don't think that was the reality of the circumstances. I feel like most of the other stuff has been said, but I noticed that whenever people talk about 48 or the years preceding 48, I think the worst thing that happens is there's a cherry picking of the facts where basically all of the blame is ascribed to this built-in idea of Zionism, that because of a handful of quotes or because of an ideology we can say that transfer or population expulsion or basically the mandate of all of these Arabs being kicked off the land was always going to happen, when I think there's a refusal sometimes as well to acknowledge that regardless of the ideas of some of the Zionist leaders, there is a political, social, and military reality on the ground that they're forced to contend with. And unfortunately, the Arabs, because of their inability to engage in diplomacy and only to use tools of war to try to negotiate everything going on in mandatory Palestine, basically always gave the Jews a reason or an excuse to fight and acquire land through that way, because of their refusal to negotiate on anything else, whether it was the partition plan in 47, whether it was the Lausanne peace conference afterwards, where Israel even offered to annex Gaza in 51, where they offered to take in 100,000 refugees. Every single deal is just rejected out of hand because the Arabs don't want a Jewish state anywhere in this region of the world. Any sort of state that did Jewish organization choose factor where people choose.
Longer. Also, we should acknowledge the fact that the speaking speeds of people here are different. Stephen speaks about 10 times faster than me. Stephen, do you want to comment on 1948?
Yeah, I think it's interesting where people